Okay, so here's the assignment that we're talking about. Um, the student issue, sorry, um, asserts that it's very poorly written. I think there are some definite needs for addressing and providing clarity to help this whole course, 7103, improve. But I think the student is um, uh, very confused about some language that is pretty clear. Um, so refer to the annotated bibliography that you developed earlier. Consider whether the variables were examined. So it's just consider at this point. She's reading that, he or she, sorry, or they, is reading that as do something about it, when that's actually an intro to the assignment. These are not the instructions yet. These are the foreword for the instructions. Let's look at them a little more closely. It says exactly what she typed. But then it goes on. Next, choose for, and this should be from, the following 6 variables: mood, motivation, performance, happiness. So it gives 6 options for variables. So the main problem here that I see is, first of all, it has them go into the annotated bibliography, which could have been qualitative, quantitative, mixed methods. And they are not really being, students are not really being encouraged to find quantitative articles. In fact, they could have done 10 or 15, I forget how many it is, in their annotated bibliography. They could have done qualitative articles, which will not have operationalization. So they need to sort of be directed toward quantitative articles that are going to have operationalization. In fact, what I would say, and what I do say to my students, is look, you may not have these types of articles in your annotated bibliography that have anything to do with mood, motivation, performance, happiness, leadership, anxiety. They weren't told that when doing the annotated bibliographies earlier in the course. And so problem one is the annotated bibliographies that they might be looking at are not necessarily quantitative. And secondly, they may not have anything to do with any of the variables that they're supposed to discuss. So really what they need to do is find 2 articles for each variable. So that's 8 articles. They can choose which ones. They need to choose 4 of the 6. And then they need to, based on the 4 that they found, they need to do a search for quantitative articles. That may not be as easy for some students, but they need to find those quantitative articles for 4 chosen variables. Let's say it's the first 4: mood, motivation, performance, and happiness. And then examine how the variable has been operationalized. For each variable, note the references to the papers you have found. So they're supposed to explain, here's the article I'm reviewing, and briefly explain how the variable was operationalized. And in these instructions, there's really, in the readings, I believe there's much better discussion, but a lot of my students have difficulty understanding what operationalization is. I don't know if that's because they're not doing the readings or because the readings don't adequately teach the material. But it's definitely not taught well in this short section of what operationalization is. In fact, many students aren't aware of that it can be that they need to be searching for quantitative articles. They'll try to discuss operationalization with qualitative constructs. And so I think the student is really confused, maybe didn't read past this paragraph. They need to. They need to realize that they're supposed to choose 4 variables, and then locate. It doesn't necessarily say from the annotated bibliography. This is sort of a primer paragraph that I would actually remove. I would love to redo this course at some point. Um, and then explain how well you think each variable has been assessed in the papers. So they're going to have 8 papers, 2 for each of the 4 variables that they choose, and they're supposed to say, to examine how the variable was operationalized. So depression's not on here, but mood is. So mood was operationalized by the Beck Depression inventory. Scores on that were evidence of mood, for instance, as represented by a score. And then they're supposed to sort of evaluate whether the study did a good job of operationalizing that variable. In other words, did they use sort of a tried and true psychometrically sound instrument to operationalize the variable, or did they sort of say, well, I made this survey up, or I got it off of, Cosmo magazine, or whatever, just some less scholarly way of doing, of operationalizing a variable. And if they did it that way, then the student should say that they didn't do very well in assessing each variable. And so really they're going to have 8 sections 4 sections with 2 articles each. 4 sections for each, 1 for each of the emotions. Call these emotions constructs or variables. 1 section for each with 2 articles per section. So that's 8 total articles. So I'm not exactly sure where the confusion is, but the student is definitely not understanding the assignment clearly. And I think it is pretty clear. I think it can be improved whenever we have time for that.